go first because I want to go to the poster session. So I have 1.5 questions. One is somewhere in your overview paper you have a diagram that says the plan for this year is to finish news story detection and to move to more fine granularity work next year. My suggestion is I am not sure if we've learned enough to move forward that part this fast. So maybe it's worth repeating the task next year until we have stable results across several actions. The other half question is I haven't probably been paying attention, but when I read it, the difference between focal event and news event was reasonably clear. But I'm not sure I can reliably distinguish between a focal event and a background event.
Right.
Is that clear in your mind?
Yeah, it's clear, but we do not address it in terms of task for the background event. So background event is a part of a news story. So if you see as a news story, it belongs to one news event. It starts with a background event and culminates into a focal event. So that's the part. But at a task level, it is not addressed, and we don't need it. And answering your first question, which we agreed because we thought we would have enough participation and attention in terms of the document finding task, which we did not have this year. So we would continue with the document finding, so news linking, and then maybe just, if we have time, we can add the second component as a pilot one.
I also want to go to the poster session, so let's keep it a little bit short. So first I want to thank the organizers, because I thought this was a great design to check. So because at events like this and all the other related events, what's always important is to build bridges between the community. So now we have this plagiarism detection community that's not really interacting as much with the search community. And the plan of this year was to have a search task disguised as a plagiarism detection task. And actually we saw now people from plagiarism detection actually sink their teeth into a search task, which is a great way to build these kinds of bridges. So this is a very nice way, because if also the IR persons had participated, we could actually do a head-to-head with methods and work on that. So I think that's actually very clever to think of tasks that do this kind of bridge over. As for the actual chosen tasks, there's a lot of related things. Doug referred to a lot of as well. Of course, it's very paradoxical if this is the motivation that people, what they did is actually use Google MT and then did monolingual something, because the main motivation could be to generate these parallel or comparable corpora, and the main use of those corpora by now at this moment is to learn statistical MT, especially for resource poor languages. There's still work to be done. Of course, Google does that at a large scale already. So that actually is a very valuable motivation, but then you also have to talk to the SMT, the Statistical Machine Translation Workshop people, because they already do these kinds of tasks, not for Hindi, but for many non-English languages, also about selecting the right sentence pairs for the machine translators to be learned. And I think that's a fruitful way, and it's also an interesting direction for the plagiarism detection, because there's a lot of similarity there, yet there's also some subtle differences, because you're going to evaluate, as Doug was telling as well, on the impact on the machine learning effectiveness, which is a different type of evaluation than the pure end stopping point of plagiarism or reuse detection. So I think it's a half full glass, and I like to look at the half full part of it of this year. And I think there's prospect of making this work.
Do you want to comment on that first? Or? I can just give you some random thoughts. I really like the idea that this task has a plan for the next years to have a long-term goal and actually get there. And the next editions of this task can evolve the problem. What I missed a bit was looking at differences in the same news stories in different languages. So you would have, if you could actually handle the whole problem, you could look at the cultural or language differences in the coverage of events in different news stories and try to find out what's going on. So that would be, from an intellectual point of view, a very challenging task. Instead of looking only at the similarities or the what's the term, the same description of the event. You could also look at differences in polarity or sentiment across these language pairs. Maybe that's something for a longer term plan or for next editions in coming years. The next point would be, what is actually the added value from a business point? So could you sell this, make this into a product and sell it to a newspaper company, for example?
The question to the answer to the last question of product would be, we have in mind something like journalistic text reuse, and Mark Stevenson worked for Reuters for some time, and he pointed out that news agencies sometimes are very interested to know that where their news is being used, in their knowledge and out of their knowledge, and once they find it, they can use it, and if they can, they can sue or something like that. And this is also a nice analysis and statistics for them to track the news generated by them being used out there.
Yes, but have you actually talked to newspaper agencies?
Not yet.
Gotten their feedback, what they think about this task?
Not yet, but it can definitely.
So it might be interesting to get some industrial collaboration going.
And actually we look forward for that, because we noticed that Times of India publishes in more than 3 languages, and they do not have this kind of interlingual links between their news stories. So if they at least put the news stories, or if the generation is completely independent, use this technologies to link them, it would be very much useful for users. That is another scope.
Actually, I was very impressed by Johannes, who is able to read my mind. No, joking. Because, as you know, at Clay, every year we try to learn from expert of related or somehow related areas. And it's not going to happen next Clay, but Clay 2014 that will be in Sheffield. One of the keynote speakers that we have in mind would like, that would be somehow related to journalist text reviews. So we would like to have the view of a news agency, just because of this cooperation Mark has been having. So yes, what the point is, it's very much important to know what is their view and how somehow a task that we are trying to organize could be more useful, and it could be better directed toward the real needs, not somehow some artificial needs that we could pretend to be real. Yes, correct.
And finally, one more point. As Jaap already said, I think it's very important to get the machine translation people into your group, so they could either profit from the comparable corpora you generate and use that for various things they do, or they could contribute to your task, because many of the approaches we saw actually relied on machine translation. But instead of using Google Translate, I would like to see more research from MT people in building up dedicated translation systems for this task. So maybe you don't need a full MT system. You could use something like translation probabilities from the phrase tables, which would give you translation alternatives, instead of looking just at one single translation from a web service. It's just an idea.
So, okay, I've got 4 quick comments. I like the poster session just as much as everyone, but I can't help myself. I have to talk. 4 pieces of advice. One is, don't ever go last on a panel with 3 such smart people in front of you. Yeah, I know, but they're going to say everything and there will be nothing left to say. Second, get an advisory board for the task. I have found over the years that advisory boards are exceedingly useful in the first stage, which is when you're thinking about who should be on them and inviting them. Third, you can ignore what the advisory board says. The value of the advisory board is in your thinking about who should be on it and in getting them there. And the advisory board isn't going to be any good at what you're trying to do. They're only going to be good at what they're trying to do. So who should be on this advisory board? Well, maybe an historian, because we talked about how historians might want to analyze news to see where the gaps are, right? So, for example, in the U.S., when someone picks up news from News Bureau, they add things that have local color, and they take out things that are inappropriate to that audience, right? And that's what the historians want to study. They want to study the changes. They don't want to study the news. So this idea of the changes, I think, is an important one. Get a translator, a professional translator, somebody who teaches at a translation school. And you can invite the advisory board to come sit in the back while we're doing all this, because they'll walk away with all kinds of ideas that might shape what they do. That's why they join your board. And get somebody from MT, of course. Okay, the last piece of advice. I suggested to you that you get a pronounceable acronym. Don't get one like MT. I mean, who in their right minds would think that they're going to do good work when they're called empty?
Would like to thank you. I think that we have to finish the short but interesting panel here in order to attend everybody the panel session. And so it's actually the trick in order to learn and that what some feedback is not to ask colleagues at the coffee break or tea break, but just to force them to say something in public, so they have to really think and to try to be critical, because otherwise the tea